All right, today we're doing number 18 of the homework 4-5. This is what I'm expecting your homework looks like for this section, 4-5 and big ideas on page 207. We'll be doing 18. You need to make sure number 17, 19, 20, and 27 look similar. So what we're talking about is how we identify and interpret the correlation coefficient, the slope, and the y-intercept. So the first thing you want to do is take your data and put it into your Desmos under table. Once you do that, then you're going to click to the plus sign and say add an expression, and you're going to type in y1 is about equal to, that's the little tilde sign, it looks like this, is about equal to mx. You're just typing the number 1, but it will come in as a sub number plus b. Once you do that, you should have all the information you need. All right. So now, what is the slope that you guys came up with? Raise your hand if you have the slope. Go, Ethan.
The slope is 1.
The slope is 1. Good. And the y-intercept? 6 and 75 hundredths. Good. So what approximately is our line of best fit? Ford?
0.619.
The line of best fit, please. The line of best fit, what's the equation that we came up with? Okay, let's go, Dion.
Y is about equal to x plus 6.7.
Y is about equal to x plus 6 and 75 hundredths. That is the equation. So we have done the first part, part A. Part B says identify and interpret the correlation coefficient. What we talked about is we want 3 sentences. Sentence number 1 identifies. Sentence number 2 explains. And sentence number 3 is really a judgment statement or opinion based on the data. So who can identify the correlation coefficient? Jonah?
Correlation coefficient is 0.619,000.
Good. 0 and 619 thousandths. When instead of saying 0 point, the decimal is what we read as and. 0 and 619, and then the thousandths. Okay? And what does it mean?
The correlation coefficient is an average weak correlation.
Okay? So the correlation coefficient is an average to weak positive correlation. We talk about whether the strength and the sign. And then what do we say?
This is an average to weak line of best fit.
This is an average to weak line of best fit. Okay? But when we're talking about the up here, really we should be putting our I think I'm putting that positive in the wrong spot. So I would say average to weak. What did I just erase there?
CC.
Okay. There we go. Average to weak correlation. Oh, no, that's right. I did write it. Okay. There we go. All right. So we've done our correlation coefficient. What does that mean? Does this mean that the two topics are related to each other? Is the volunteers each day related to the days?
No.
No. Okay, not very much so. Our book reads week as anything almost probably less than about 0.8. They said that 0.6 is a weak. They said that this is a weak correlation. I like to kind of break it up and put it into the middle, the average. Would we put money on this? Probably not. Okay, the next part is interpreting the slope. Now, the thing to remember is that the slope, remember our slope formula is is y2 minus y1 over x2, so it's our change in our y over our change in our x. Our slope is a rate. There's 2 units. The y units talk about what topic? People. And the x units talk about what? Days. So we have to relate that to our slope. If our slope is the number 1, we have to convert that to a fraction. What fraction would that be? 1 over 1. So now, can we put this into a sentence describing that? First we identify. Maxim.
The amount of people.
First identify what is the slope. The slope is 1. Okay? Now explain what it means.
Each day.
This means in a sentence form, a complete sentence.
This means that each day there's one more person.
Each day, or we could say one person, I'm going to go in order of it. One person per day volunteers. Or I think it would more so, since it's one additional person. One additional or an increase in one person per day. When it's positive, it's an increase. When it's negative, it's a decrease. Okay? So we're going to say the slope is 1. This means that one additional person per day volunteers. Okay? The next one asks for the y-intercept. What is the y-intercept? This isn't D, but step 1, identify. Go, Ford.
The y-intercept is 6.75.
Is 6 and 75/100ths, or let's put it into ordered pair form. What ordered pair is that?
6.75.
0, 6 and 75/100ths. Please read our decimals correctly. Okay.
And then you will write.
Now listen. Remember, it's an ordered pair. This is how an ordered pair goes. X represents what?
The days.
And the Y represents the people.
Yeah.
So now explain that to me.
So, there are an additional 6.75 people that volunteer every day.
No,
Along with
because you're not making sense of your X. Logan.
On 0 days.
On day 0. On day 0.
7 people come.
7 people volunteer. Take it back to the story. Now, does this make sense to you?
No.
So you're going to say that this does not make sense. And you're writing this in the context of the situation. Why? Yes. Because there is no day 0. So when they ask us to interpret, we can interpret it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to make sense. So one more time. For your homework, my expectation was that you were answering these word problems like this. We did things in pieces and parts. Remember, we add our data to the Desmos. We find our line of best fit. We create the equation that describes the line of best fit, a linear regression equation. The second part, we look for our R. We identify our correlation coefficient. There's 3 sentences. Identify, explain, and make a judgment. The next part, it says, identify and interpret the slope and the y-intercept. Number 1, we identify. We say in sentence form, the slope is blah, blah, blah. we explain. This means take it to the fraction. Remember, a slope is always a rate. It will have a numerator and a denominator, and you have to relate it to the topics. Okay? And then we also go and do the same thing with our y-intercept. Notice how I wrote the y-intercept in ordered pair form. You have to make sense of that 0. A y-intercept will always have your x be 0. Explain that. Sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, we say it does not make sense. We can still interpret it. It means on day 0 we have about 7 people volunteering. That doesn't mean that this does not make sense in the context of the situation, because you can't have a day 0. Yes.
So the third sentence when talking about the CC is kind of like the same as the second one, but you're just like making it into the line, like you're talking in terms of the line.
Yes. Well, it's just your judgment. Okay, it's strong, it's weak, or it's positive weak, strong weak.
But you're doing that in the sentence.
Right, you are. You're right. It's just kind of your judgment. So I don't feel like this would be a good line of best fit.
Okay.
That's really the last one.
And then also, I don't know, but it would just be, for me, it'd be more helpful. Like if you did like one complete problem, like before, like you did the.
Well, you're going to go back and you're going to go do this tonight. That's what you're doing tonight. It took a lot to explain this to you. And so we couldn't get to a full problem. That's why when I gave it to you, so I'm giving you the time to go back and redo these. Was this a good enough?
Yeah.
The last part of the homework that we hadn't talked about is the portion, I believe it's like number 21 through 24, which talks about a causal relationship. Everybody say causal relationship.
Causal relationship.
Everybody say causation.
Causation.
So causation is when one variable causes another variable to change. In this situation, do days cause the number of people to change?
No.
Not necessarily. So it's not a good line of fit. If I were investing money in this, I wouldn't, because there's no causation. Okay? But if we looked at like hours that I work versus the paycheck I get. If I work a lot of hours, do I get a lot of pay?
Yeah.
So there we have causation. What about time spent exercising and the number of calories burned? Is there a causation?
Yes.
Okay. Is it a causal relationship?
Yes.
Okay. So what about the number of banks in a population in a city?
Yes.
Do banks cause a population?
No.
No. Banks do not cause a population. So, with that in mind, that's what we mean by causation and causal relationship. Is everybody clear? So my expectation is that you go back to 4-5 and you revise any of your homework that's not done properly. This is how I'm going to test you on this problem. Do you guys understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Am I being clear? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that now you have the ability to answer this kind of question?
Yes.
Okay. That's the recording for today.
Can you shout me out?
Too late.